Next topic for today, something I want to talk about because we have Superman Todd on the show. He's one of our many guests who is a veteran. We kind of grow them around here through, again, no concerted effort. It just so happens that there are a lot of left-wing veterans out there, way more than people really realize. But the thing is, are we in the middle of a military coup? And that is a question that, kind of sounds surprising, but it is something that I sort of alluded to when Donald Trump was elected, in that the military might be our last hope, in that they just don't listen to the president. But that also comes with a hell of a lot of scary things too. And the reason that we're discussing this today is because of an article that Ken Klippenstein wrote. If you don't know who Ken Klippenstein is, he is a journalist formerly from The Intercept, who left The Intercept because they were not giving him enough freedom of what he was able to cover. And The Intercept is one of the more progressive news rags out there, right? So Ken Klippenstein, very much, he's a principled guy, but I really liked this article from him. And there's a couple things here to definitely talk about. But he spoke with multiple people within the Justice Department, within the Pentagon, and there is a coup is probably a strongly phrased way to put this, but to put it bluntly, Caldwell, what's his first name? Dan Caldwell, who was Hegseth's senior advisor, who's one of the 5 people within Hegseth's department that were recently canned. He was interviewed and he said, let's be honest, everyone knows where the leaks are coming from. It's from the career staff who don't like what the president and the secretary and the vice president want to do. There's people in the joint staff that I've come to respect, but a lot of them are incredibly hostile to the secretary, to the president, and the vice president's worldview. It's chaos in the Pentagon right now. People are not listening to the chain of command. There is a lot of politics going on in an institution that really shouldn't be politicized all that much. So here's my question to you guys. As you guys are veterans. You guys have way more experience in all of this than I do. I'm of two minds. I think it's very good for the military to not do what Donald Trump says because Donald Trump is a fascist. However, that sets a very dangerous precedent of the military not being under civilian control. Where is the line here? I don't know. How far would you want the military to go in not listening to the president of the United States? And where do you draw that line? Todd, we'll go to you first.
I think there's very little chance that there is a military coup going against Donald Trump right now. Is there a coup going against Pete Hegseth? Yes, I believe there probably is. And this is why it's important to pick a competent person to be the Secretary of Defense. This is why the Senate had a constitutional duty to vet him and decide whether or not this guy is up to the task, and whether or not the narcissistic people who've been in the military for 30, 40 years, reaching the rank of generals and all this kind of stuff, will be able to show the proper respect to a civilian who is in charge of the Department of Defense. And I always said, if Trump would have just picked Ron DeSantis, none of this stuff we're talking about right now would be happening. Would people disagree with him? Would people have a problem with his political stances? Yes, but he's competent and he's been in charge of shit before. And he's not just some cultural war dipshit. And he has a little bit of military experience. He was an officer in the Naval Reserve or something. Like, he's got that feather in his hat too, and that would have been fine. But what we actually have in as the Secretary of Defense is a dude who was, in the Army National Guard in Minnesota or whatever, was a major for like 5 minutes. And okay, if you have led something else, if you were the CEO of GM, or you were a governor, or you were in charge of some governmental agency at some point, then you go, okay, cool. He has just a little bit of military experience, so he can understand the troops and play, think in the having his thinking of what the experience of the typical boots on the ground is like. But this guy has been basically a platoon leader on a couple of deployments and a Fox News host. And anybody who's not a moron should have known that when he showed up at the Pentagon and just started bossing people around who know what the fuck they're talking about, as in know better than anybody in the world what they're talking about, that he wasn't going to be respected. And, this whole leaks thing is like the paramount of incompetence. There's no way to explain it away. And it doesn't matter how many hours he puts his face in front of a TV screen, in front of a camera and a microphone, and tries to blame the wokeness and the anti-Trumpers for all the bad publicity that he's getting. It doesn't take away from, and it doesn't change the fact that anybody with half a brain knows that all this shows that he's an incompetent nincompoop who, sure, if you put him back in the National Guard and gave him some good mentorship, in a couple of years, could it be a good battalion commander in the Minnesota National Guard? Yeah, he could. But can he lead the Pentagon in any way, shape, or form with 10 or 15 more years of preparation? Absolutely not. The dude is totally unfit for that task. And is there a military coup taking place against him? On some level, yes, because in their minds, these people know, for the best interest of the security of this country, this guy cannot be in charge of the biggest military force on the face of the earth.
Todd, I love this so much. I couldn't wait to get your opinion on this. So I want to bounce back and forth with you on a lot of this stuff here. I want to address Colby's comment here. Okay, but do they have 19 years of experience? Now, the funny thing is now, addressing with Pete Hegseth, the answer is no. He does not have 19 years of experience when it comes to military service. In fact,
and by the way, TJ, I just want to inform people, if you're watching this video right now and you don't understand what that's a reference to, well, make sure to watch us live at 6:30 EST on Thursdays, and you'll get all the references from the comments. Anyway, continue, TJ. I just wanted to let people know where they can find that.
Absolutely. Find us in the live tab at the Left Wing Pod on YouTube. So, yeah, What Todd said about Pete Hegseth is absolutely correct. One thing that I wanted to mention with Todd is, outside, in every battalion headquarters, you have the chain of command up there, starting from the president and going on down to, your, platoon sergeant, I think is where it ends. But when it has the Secretary of Defense on that list. And I was just thinking that there are millions of soldiers and airmen and Marines out there that go to their battalion headquarters and they see the Honorable Pete Hegseth written on all these pictures. And it's very funny to me that if any man is, I can't think of anyone less deserving of the term honorable than Pete Hegseth. And Todd is right about this guy. Todd, I know a lot of people in the military. I know very few who are my friends. I know very few of them that actually have less experience in the military than Pete Hegseth. This guy was in the National Guard for like 12 years or something like that. And Todd, as you mentioned, he never even held a company command. The man never in a company command at all. And now he's in command of the entire United States military. Absolute insanity. And what I read down here, Todd has a ton more experience than Pete Hegseth. Everyone I know has more experience than Pete Hegseth. But watching him collapse and come in and try to change stuff in the most absurd way possible. In the Army, we call these folks good idea fairies. That's something that we would all refer to when someone comes in with just all a bunch of good ideas that are just dog shit. It reminded me of a time years ago. I used to work at my battalion S3, and we had a meeting at brigade with this master sergeant from division who came down from division command. He came down. I can't remember exactly why he was there, but he wanted to talk to us about how we were going to set up an event for Native American History Month. And I was there with a captain and a major, and the three of us talking to this guy. And he says, okay, so the idea he pitched to us was, I kid you not, the Trail of Tears Ruck March. That's the idea he came up with. He wanted to do a Trail of Tears Ruck March. And when he said that, I kind of just froze. I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say to this. And the captain sitting next to me said, well, we would have to handle this really respectfully. He's like, oh yeah. We could have the whole family involved. We could have traditional food being served there. There could be face painting station for the kids. I mean, this went on and on. It just kept getting worse. Every word out of this guy's mouth was significantly worse than the last. And we're just shell shocked. And the guy does this and he leaves. And I remember the major turning to us and saying, fellas, we're not doing that. Oh, no, absolutely not. No, of course not. That's shutting that down right now. It reminds me of that guy, except Hegseth is doing this to be purposely offensive. He's doing it to wreck as many institutions as possible. And I think that Todd is right. Absolutely. That there's only so much damage you can do in a leadership position when you don't know what you're doing or you're actively trying to be as caustic and as reprehensible as possible. And it's exactly what's happened now, where people, there's only so far they're going to go to risk their careers and personal reputation for your vanity. There's only so far you can push these folks. I do have to wonder what happened, like why the people he fired were fired, because that's the weird one to me. Because the regular people, like Todd said, the people who have been in the military for decades and they know what they're doing and they're vital for this operation. Of course, they're going to fight this every chance they get, and he can't fire all of them. But those guys were ones he handpicked, and he still fired them. What would you think about that, Todd?
I don't know that he fired them. That's where I'm like, who told him they were fired? And,
okay.
I think Pete Hegseth's days are incredibly numbered. This shit show is not going to go on very much longer. And when what was it? Was it PBS? No, PBS who reported a couple of days ago that the White House has already quietly started vetting or compiling a new list of Secretary of Defense candidates. And I'm like, again, a clear moment of how incompetent are you guys that you don't already have this list out? Like, how's the next person not already in the chamber for all these positions? Because everybody knows every single one of these people is getting fired before the 4 years is up.
Yep.
Every single one of them is. So they should already have their replacement lined up, I would think. And everyone knew Pete Hegseth was the least qualified. He's even less qualified than Kash Patel is to lead the FBI. Everybody knew he was going to be the first one to be fired. So there should have already been the number 2 Secretary of Defense already.
Yeah, it's really, I like the point that you made in the first time we were talking, Todd, where it's like, this is the importance of hiring competent people. I feel like a lot of people just think the government is just a joke that doesn't matter, and that's very incorrect. But like, it is kind of the thinking. It's like, oh, well, Trump wants this guy, so that's who it should be. And I feel like this also boils down to like a psychological difference. I'm not even going to say between conservatives and people on the left, because I see it in the left too. But like, there's a specific type of person, they tend to be more conservative, but they don't have to be, where they think just authority deserves to be respected. And that is not how the world actually works. And you see this on every level of society, of whether it's a teacher, a parent, a boss, a coach, whatever, and they aren't respected by their underlings. They get mad about it. They throw a fit. But like, at the end of the day, you can't just make someone do something. If you've lost the respect of the Pentagon in 2 months, you're unqualified for the job. Part of your job is to get the people beneath you to buy into your vision. Again, whether you're the Secretary of Defense, you're a CEO, you're the head of a household, you need the people who you are telling what to do to buy into your vision. And there's a certain amount of force you can use to coerce them to do what you want, sure. But if you don't actually have that, or I actually do think Pete Hegseth has that, but he doesn't have even the competence required to wield it effectively, they're not going to do what you want. And that's your fault. The buck stops at the top level. And this is the excuse we talked about early in the show that the Trump administration keeps making of, oh, it's the career bureaucrats, all these, they aren't doing what we're telling them to do. They're maliciously compliant or just not listening. It's like, bro, it's your job to get them to do that. That's literally your entire job, is getting these people to do what you want them to do. And if you're failing at that, that should not reflect well on you. And it shocks me. Again, I guess that it shouldn't shock me, because there's a fucking dude complaining about $1,900 guitar who won't blame it on Trump's tariffs. But like, it shocks me that this is so pervasive in society. Because again, it really isn't a political thing. This is a ideology that I feel like a lot of people have. And one of the reasons that I
Well,
fucking hated the military since I was a very young child, because I never understood this ideology of just a chain of command. But like, it's pervasive, and I don't know how to get people to understand that that's just not how things actually work in the real world.
I think there's another layer of Pete Hegseth too, is that not only is he incompetent, is the other part of it is, and I'm sure the senior officials in the DOD see this on the day-to-day in a way that we don't, is the fact that Pete Hegseth is ate up with PTSD, and the way that he has always dealt with it in his life is to drink it away and sex it away. I'm not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. You know, the military service right now, after a 20-year long war, is full of service members who are post-traumatic stress disorder out the ass. And but they go to mental health and they go to therapy and all these types of things. You can have that person who tries to self-medicate their issues be in charge of the DOD. And we listened to this in the Senate confirmation hearings. It was all brought forward like, hey, this person has a substance abuse problem. Maybe he shouldn't be in charge of everything. And so he's incompetent and he has the substance abuse mental health problem.
Yeah, the Pete Hegseth thing, that's a good point, Todd, that I fear, or more or less know, that people like that about him on the right, you know, his supporters, the Trump folks, that because what the one word I would use to describe Pete Hegseth is unserious. He's a deeply, profoundly unserious human being. Like you've mentioned, yeah, he's got a tiny bit of military service here and there. A lot of clearly, whatever the issues are, he has not dealt with them in a grown up and mature manner. And he was a shit talking weekend host on Fox News. Like Pete Hegseth, the first thought I think of is when he made the speech when he was hosting a news show about how he doesn't wash his hands. He thinks washing his hands is some sort of conspiracy. Remember that? Or the time he threw an axe and hit a drummer, or the sex scandals he's had, or all the times people said, yeah, this guy clearly has a problem with alcohol. And during his confirmation, he said, listen, if you give me the job, I promise I'll stop drinking. This is someone who you wouldn't trust to like be the manager at a Dairy Queen. And you've made him the top official at the Department of Defense. Say what you want about, you know, Jim Mattis or Lloyd Austin or whatever beefs you have with those guys, infinitely more qualified and more serious than Pete Hegseth. And I don't know. I think this is just the path that we've chosen as citizens of this great nation, that we celebrate people who don't know what they're doing. I think we were talking about it backstage, Todd, that we've just reached this horrifying crossroad where we are faced with the reality of who we actually are as a people on this planet, that we don't deserve the power that we've been given. The fact that the economy of the world has been stuttering these last couple of weeks because one guy in particular, who we all apparently believe should be in charge, just ends it at a moment's notice. The same thing is happening with U.S. military operations. I try not to be like black-pilled about everything, about how stuff is just falling apart, but I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And any other thoughts on that, John?
I mean, that I guess the question to wrap this topic up is, at what point does it get too much to bear from the military perspective? Because, you know, you're saying it's a Pete Hegseth problem. I can agree with that. But I don't know if Donald Trump is ever going to admit he's wrong at this point. I don't know if he's ever going to replace Pete Hegseth. And if he does, I don't think he's going to suddenly decide to start hiring competent people. So eventually, this is going to come to a head one way or the other. Do you guys think it's possible that the military says, we're not listening to this guy anymore? Just publicly stated.
Yeah, I think if Hegseth stays in, he becomes a figurehead.
Yes.
Secretary of Defense, and everybody underneath him outside of his little minions just basically ignore the fact that he's there.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Todd. That you've seen this happen. You've seen this happen when someone comes into a position of authority. In the military, you see it all the time. And the biggest mistake that people make, they learn it pretty quickly, most people, that it doesn't really matter what your rank is or even how your time in service. If you show up to a new unit, you find someone who knows what the fuck is going on and you learn from them right away. You find out who has their shit together and who the people respect, find out what they're doing, learn as much about it as you possibly can. Hegseth did not do this. Hegseth went in way over his head on something, and you know, he's starting to drown. And good point you brought up with Ron DeSantis, Todd. I hadn't thought about that because you're 100% correct. If Ron DeSantis was the Secretary of Defense, as much as I dislike the guy and how I've never said a good thing about Ron DeSantis in my life, I don't respect him, he would be 10 times as good and honestly as qualified for the position as Pete Hegseth, because say what you want about him, he has been in leadership. He's been the governor of the state for, going on a decade now. So yeah, I thought that was a good point.
Thank you for making it to the end of the video. This time we're being for serious. If you made it to this point, you are our favorite subscriber. Oh, what's that? You don't actually subscribe? Well, go fuck yourself. Get out of here unless you want to subscribe, in which case you're our favorite subscriber again. If you want to know where to find our amazing guest, you should already know where to find him since he's been a wonderful contributor to the show many times. But Superman Todd, if people for some reason haven't heard of you, where can they find you?
Hey, I'm just on TikTok as Superman Todd 2. I post on there sometimes. I don't post a whole lot anymore, but feel free to go on and interact, comment, like, share, all the stuff. Cuss me out. Tell me it's awesome. Don't really care either way. So, yeah, Superman Todd 2 on TikTok.
Thank you so much, Todd. We really appreciate you joining us last minute, as you agreed to. Folks, I want to take a second to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Huge Ass Watches. Do you have someone in your life who provides an informative and entertaining product absolutely free of charge, but is occasionally a few seconds late? If so, then Huge Ass Watches might be right for you. Contact the Lord of the Watch, Huge Ass himself, to get a design personalized just for you. Don't procrastinate. Call now. Time waits for no man, and neither does Huge Ass. Thank you, folks. Catch you later.